Welcome to Hauntales, where darkest stories come alive. I know many of you tune into these tales to drift off to sleep, so settle in, relax, and get comfortable. Whether you're lying in bed or curled up on the couch, let the whispers of these chilling encounters carry you away. Before we begin tonight's story, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more spine-tingling tales, and let me know in the comments where are you listening from, and what time is it. I love seeing how far our stories travel. For the best experience, use your headphones, close your eyes, and let every word sink deep into your mind. Now we begin our stories for tonight. The New Girl. Lyra had always felt an unquenchable thirst for family, a dream nurtured since childhood amidst the chaos of her upbringing. Raised in a home filled with constant arguments and neglect, she longed for a haven, a place where laughter reigned, and love enveloped her like a warm blanket. In her youth, she often retreated to her imagination, crafting vivid scenarios where she was surrounded by a joyful family, each member filled with the affection she craved. These daydreams became her escape, a sanctuary where she could envision a future brimming with love and stability. As Lyra grew older, her aspirations evolved into a desire for a family of her own. She pursued a career in social work, motivated by her past to help children find the stability she had once yearned for. Lyra dedicated her life to advocating for underprivileged children, tirelessly working to provide them with the resources they needed to succeed. Her heart ached for those who felt lost, and she hoped to create a home that would be a sanctuary for someone in need. The desire to give back to the world was woven into her very being, making her both driven and compassionate. Keaton, on the other hand, was the grounding force in Lyra's life. Their meeting felt serendipitous, occurring at a community event where Lyra shared her vision of improving the foster care system. He had been captivated not just by her passion but also by her ability to connect with others. Keaton was a kind soul, a schoolteacher whose heart brimmed with compassion for his students. He believed in the power of education to transform lives, and Lyra admired his unwavering dedication to his work. Their chemistry was instant, fueled by shared values and dreams that seemed to align perfectly. Their relationship blossomed swiftly, each moment together deepening their connection. Late-night conversations filled with laughter and vulnerability brought them closer. They spent evenings discussing their hopes, often envisioning a future filled with children running through their home, laughter echoing in the hallways. Each dream painted a picture of warmth and joy that contrasted sharply with Lyra's childhood memories. They married in a quaint ceremony surrounded by friends, a celebration of love that felt destined to last, a promise to create a life filled with the warmth they both craved. However, as time passed, life presented them with unforeseen challenges that tested the foundations of their love. The couple faced years of heartache as they struggled with infertility, their dreams of parenthood slipping further from reach. Each failed attempt weighed heavily on them, turning their once vibrant aspirations into a haunting silence. The walls of their home, once filled with laughter, now echoed with the ghostly remnants of dreams deferred. The couple grappled with feelings of inadequacy, wondering if they were destined to remain childless. Yet, in their darkest moments, Lyra and Keaton found solace in each other. They leaned on their shared commitment, discussing adoption as a way to create the family they had always envisioned. The idea felt both daunting and exhilarating, igniting a flicker of hope that had dimmed over the years. Lyra immersed herself in research, poring over books and online forums, seeking the best path forward. She reached out to others who had adopted, listening intently to their experiences and advice, eager to learn everything she could about the process. As they began to navigate the complex world of adoption, the couple attended workshops, joined support groups, and spoke with families who had undergone the journey. They learned about the unique challenges that came with bringing a child into their lives, a blend of joy and potential heartbreak. Each session reminded them of their purpose, stoking the embers of their dreams once more. They shared their fears and aspirations with others, creating bonds that would help them weather the storms ahead. Each step in the process solidified their commitment to one another and their dream of becoming parents. Lyra and Keaton decided to pursue adoption through a local agency, their hearts racing with anticipation and anxiety. They filled out forms, attended interviews, and provided background checks, all the bureaucratic steps necessary to prepare for the arrival of a child. Lyra felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was the beginning of a new chapter. They pictured a little girl with laughter in her eyes, someone who would fill their home with the love they had always craved. The thought of nurturing a child and providing a safe haven for them filled Lyra with warmth. Despite the mounting excitement, the journey was not without its doubts. Lyra often found herself wrestling with fears. Would they be able to provide a stable environment for a child? Would the child be able to accept their love? These thoughts lingered like shadows, casting doubts over their hopeful visions. Keaton reassured her, reminding her of their dedication and shared vision. His unwavering support grounded her, allowing her to confront her fears with a semblance of courage, even when anxiety gnawed at her insides. One crisp autumn day, as leaves crunched beneath their feet, Lyra and Keaton strolled through a park, discussing the possibility of their future child. The trees glowed with vibrant colors, a reminder of the changing seasons in their lives. They marveled at the families around them, watching children play and laugh, their joy palpable. Lyra smiled, feeling a warmth in her heart as she envisioned what life would be like when they finally had a child to cherish. The laughter of children echoed like music, filling the air with a sense of possibility. Unbeknownst to them, the twists of fate were already set in motion, leading them toward a destiny they could never have anticipated. The journey to parenthood would soon begin, filled with dreams, hope, and the dark shadows that lurked just beneath the surface. Each step they took brought them closer to a child who would alter the course of their lives forever, but they remained blissfully unaware of the challenges that lay ahead. Lyra felt a burgeoning excitement for the future, her heart swelling with dreams that danced just beyond the horizon. The moment Lyra and Keaton entered the adoption agency, an air of anticipation enveloped them. The warm, pastel-colored walls and cheerful artwork offered a stark contrast to the emotional weight they had carried for years. An attendant greeted them with a genuine smile, guiding them to a cozy meeting room filled with soft chairs and a table laden with brochures about adoption. Lyra's heart raced with excitement and nerves as they discussed the process, eager to embark on this new chapter of their lives. Days turned into weeks as they completed the necessary paperwork and underwent interviews. Each session felt like a mix of scrutiny and hope as they shared their stories, dreams, and aspirations for parenthood. Lyra felt a connection to the children waiting for families, imagining how their lives could intertwine. Keaton remained steadfast by her side, offering reassurance with every question they faced. Together, they navigated the complexities of the adoption system, their bond growing stronger with each challenge they overcame. After what felt like an eternity, they received a call that would change everything. Lyra could barely contain her excitement as the agency informed them about a little girl named Azura, who had been placed for adoption. She was 7 years old, with a history that was both heartbreaking and intriguing. The agency emphasized that Azura had endured much in her young life, yet she possessed a resilient spirit that shone through in her photographs. Lyra's heart fluttered as she imagined the potential for joy this child could bring into their home. They eagerly arranged to meet Azura, counting down the days with growing anticipation. On the day of the meeting, Lyra donned her favorite dress, hoping to create a positive impression. Keaton dressed neatly, a comforting presence beside her as they traveled to the agency. The drive felt electric, the world outside blurring in a mix of excitement and nerves. Lyra's heart raced at the thought of meeting their future daughter, wondering how the encounter would unfold. When they arrived, they were led to a brightly lit playroom filled with toys, colorful books, and cheerful decorations. Azura sat in the corner, quietly engrossed in a puzzle, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders. The moment Lyra laid eyes on her, an overwhelming sense of love washed over her. Azura looked up, her bright blue eyes meeting Lyra's, sparking a connection that felt instantaneous and profound. It was as if their souls recognized each other, and Lyra felt an unexplainable bond forming. Lyra knelt down to Azura's level, introducing herself with a soft smile. Azura's gaze shifted between Lyra and Keaton, a flicker of curiosity lighting up her face. Lyra felt a mix of emotions: joy, nervousness, and a touch of sadness for all that Azura had endured. They spent the afternoon playing games, sharing stories, and slowly breaking the ice that had separated them. Azura's laughter filled the room, bringing warmth that Lyra had longed for. As the day unfolded, Lyra began to notice the nuances of Azura's behavior. The girl was not only bright but also surprisingly insightful for her age. She asked pointed questions, demonstrating a maturity that was both charming and unsettling. Keaton shared in the joy of discovery, laughing along with Azura as they engaged in friendly competition over board games. However, Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that beneath Azura's joyful exterior lay a complex tapestry of emotions waiting to be unraveled. By the end of the visit, Lyra felt an indescribable connection to Azura. The girl had stolen her heart, and she knew deep down that she was meant to be their daughter. As they hugged goodbye, Lyra felt a pang of longing, wishing she could take Azura home right then and there. The agency representatives assured them that Azura would thrive in a loving environment, but Lyra couldn't help but worry about the challenges they would face as a family. Would Azura feel safe and loved? Would she adjust to the new life they hoped to provide? In the following weeks, Lyra and Keaton prepared for Azura's arrival with relentless enthusiasm. They decorated her future bedroom in soft pastels, filling it with books, toys, and trinkets that reflected the love they already felt for her. Lyra envisioned Azura's laughter echoing through their home, the walls adorned with memories yet to be made. The couple took parenting classes, soaking up every bit of advice they could find. They were determined to create a nurturing environment where Azura could flourish. Finally, the day arrived when Azura would officially join their family. Lyra's heart raced with excitement as they drove to the agency, where Azura would be waiting for them. Keaton reached for her hand, squeezing it reassuringly. The anticipation felt electric, coursing through Lyra's veins. As they entered the agency, the warmth of the room enveloped them, but the reality of the moment began to sink in. When Lyra laid eyes on Azura again, her heart soared. The girl looked up with wide eyes, her expression a mixture of hope and uncertainty. Lyra knelt down, enveloping her in a hug, feeling the warmth of the girl's small body against her. It was a moment Lyra had dreamed of, a culmination of years of longing and heartache. As they stood together, Lyra whispered promises of love and safety, reassuring Azura that she was finally home. As they left the agency, Lyra felt a sense of joy that was both overwhelming and surreal. The car ride home was filled with laughter and conversation, each moment a thread weaving their new family together. Yet Lyra couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something deeper lay beneath the surface of this joyful occasion. She glanced at Azura, who gazed out the window, a flicker of something inscrutable crossing her face. In the days that followed, Lyra and Keaton reveled in their new role as parents. They explored parks, played games, and shared bedtime stories, each moment stitched into the fabric of their burgeoning family. But even amid the laughter, Lyra found herself occasionally pausing, sensing that Azura carried the weight of secrets yet to be revealed. There was an intensity in the girl's demeanor that both intrigued and unnerved Lyra. As the days passed, the initial bliss of their new life began to intertwine with uncertainty. Lyra couldn't ignore the way Azura's laughter sometimes seemed tinged with a hint of darkness, like a shadow lurking just beyond the light. It was a feeling that gnawed at her, weaving itself into the fabric of their happiness, and she knew that the journey ahead would be filled with both light and shadow. As the initial euphoria of Azura's arrival settled into a routine, Lyra began to notice peculiarities that cast a shadow over their new life. At first they were small, easily dismissed as the quirks of a young girl adjusting to a new home. Azura would often gaze out the window for long stretches, her eyes seemingly focused on something beyond the horizon. Lyra would ask her what she saw, but Azura would merely shake her head and smile, an enigmatic expression crossing her face. It was as if a veil of secrets enveloped her, a world just out of reach that Lyra couldn't penetrate. One afternoon, as they played a board game in the living room, Lyra noticed the temperature in the room plummeting. The once cozy atmosphere shifted, a chill creeping in that made her shiver. Keaton, noticing her discomfort, joked about their lack of heating, but Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Azura, however, continued playing, her focus unwavering. It was as if she was untouched by the sudden cold that enveloped them, her laughter ringing out like a ghostly echo against the backdrop of growing unease. The following night, Lyra was jolted awake by a series of soft thuds coming from the hallway. Heart racing, she sat up in bed, her eyes darting toward the door. Keaton was fast asleep beside her, oblivious to the strange sounds. Curiosity and concern propelled her out of bed, and she quietly made her way to the hallway, the soft carpet muffling her footsteps. As she approached Azura's room, she hesitated, listening intently. The thuds had ceased, replaced by an eerie silence that felt almost palpable. Pushing open Azura's bedroom door, Lyra was greeted by a sight that sent chills down her spine. Azura sat upright in bed, her gaze fixed on the wall, a look of concentration etched on her small features. The dim light from the hallway cast long shadows, distorting the familiar contours of the room. Lyra's heart pounded in her chest as she called out softly to Azura, but the girl remained still, unresponsive to her presence. Lyra felt a shiver dance along her spine, uncertainty flooding her senses. After what felt like an eternity, Azura turned her head, her blue eyes meeting Lyra's with an unsettling intensity. "Did you hear them?" she asked, her voice a whisper that echoed unnaturally in the stillness. Confused, Lyra shook her head, her heart racing. Azura continued, "They were calling me." The weight of those words hung in the air, twisting Lyra's stomach in knots. What could a 7-year-old possibly mean by that? Had she heard something Lyra couldn't? The next morning, Lyra tried to shake off the unease, chalking it up to a vivid dream or the wild imagination of a child. Yet, as the days passed, strange occurrences began to multiply, weaving in an unsettling fabric of reality that Lyra couldn't ignore. Azura seemed to slip into moods without warning, her laughter fading into a distant memory. One evening, Lyra found her in the backyard, speaking softly to an empty space. When asked who she was talking to, Azura simply smiled and said, "My friend." Lyra's heart raced at the thought of invisible companions, an idea that felt unnerving and foreign. Keaton noticed the change in atmosphere as well. He caught Lyra's eye one evening as they prepared dinner, and she could see the concern mirrored in his expression. "Is it just me, or does it feel like something's off?" he asked, his voice low and tentative. Lyra nodded, feeling the weight of unspoken fears. They decided to talk to Azura, hoping to understand what was happening within the confines of their home. That night they sat down for dinner, attempting to engage Azura in conversation, but the girl's gaze was often distant, as if she were somewhere far beyond the reach of their words. During one particularly tense dinner, the lights flickered, plunging the room into darkness for a brief moment before returning. Azura's eyes widened, and she looked up at Lyra with a strange mix of fear and excitement. "They don't like it when you talk about them," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Lyra's heart sank. Who were they? The atmosphere grew thick with unease, the air charged with an energy that left Lyra feeling both frightened and protective. She exchanged a worried glance with Keaton, silently questioning if they were truly ready for the unknown depths of Azura's mind. In the following days, Lyra delved deeper into research about adopted children and their potential struggles. She discovered that many children faced unseen traumas that manifested in various ways, including behavior changes and emotional withdrawal. Lyra had hoped that love would be enough to heal Azura's wounds, but the deeper she dug, the more questions emerged. How could they support Azura if she was grappling with fears or memories they couldn't comprehend? Lyra felt a tightening in her chest, a sense of urgency to reach out to Azura and understand her better. Determined to forge a stronger connection, Lyra began spending more one-on-one time with Azura. They would engage in creative activities, painting, drawing, and storytelling, trying to coax out the girl's hidden feelings. Yet, each time Lyra thought they were making progress, Azura would retreat into her own world, her laughter replaced by a distant gaze. Lyra found herself talking to her reflection in the mirror, searching for answers that eluded her. She began to worry about the shadow that loomed over their newfound family, a dark presence that seemed to whisper secrets just beyond the surface. One stormy night, as rain lashed against the windows, Lyra heard Azura calling out from her room. She rushed to the child's side, only to find the girl sitting on the floor, surrounded by her toys, an intense expression on her face. "They want to play," Azura said, her voice hauntingly calm. Lyra's heart raced. "Who, sweetie?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. But Azura simply pointed to the shadows dancing along the walls, her eyes wide with wonder. Lyra felt a shiver run down her spine, her instincts screaming that something was very wrong. The following day, Lyra confided in Keaton about her concerns. As they sat on the couch, surrounded by a sea of cozy blankets, Lyra shared everything she had observed. Keaton listened intently, his brow furrowed in thought. "Maybe we should talk to someone, a therapist or a counselor," he suggested. Lyra nodded, knowing deep down that they needed guidance to navigate this unfamiliar terrain. The shadows that loomed over Azura felt like an ever-growing darkness, and she was determined to uncover the truth behind the child's cryptic words and unsettling behavior. Despite their determination to find help, the strangeness only deepened. Lyra found Azura sitting on the floor one afternoon, engrossed in a game of marbles, her expression uncharacteristically serious. "I don't want to play with you anymore," Azura said suddenly, her voice cold. Confused, Lyra knelt beside her, trying to understand. "Who don't you want to play with, sweetheart?" she asked gently. Azura turned her head slightly, gazing into the distance as if someone stood there, invisible to Lyra. "The girl," she replied, her tone darkening. Lyra felt a cold shiver creep up her spine. There was something about that statement that unsettled her deeply. In the days that followed, Lyra's world seemed to twist into a darker reality. Strange noises echoed in the night, shadows flickered in the corners of her vision, and Azura's mood fluctuated unpredictably. Lyra couldn't ignore the feeling that something sinister had taken root within their home, a creeping dread that wrapped itself around her heart like a vice. With each passing day, the line between reality and the unknown began to blur, and Lyra felt herself standing on the precipice of a nightmare that was far from over. As the strange occurrences in the house grew more intense, Lyra began to notice a peculiar shift in Azura's behavior, particularly towards Keaton. The little girl would follow him around the house, her eyes glimmering with an intensity that felt almost unnerving. Whenever Keaton entered a room, Azura was not far behind, her gaze fixed on him with an unwavering fascination. At first, Lyra found it endearing, a sign that Azura was starting to bond with her new father. However, as the days went by, a sense of discomfort settled in her stomach. Azura's fixation manifested in small, almost innocuous ways. She would ask Keaton to play games, often opting for activities that involved teamwork, her laughter ringing out like bells. Lyra appreciated the closeness they were developing, but couldn't shake the nagging feeling that there was something more behind Azura's attention. Keaton seemed oblivious to the growing intensity, engaging with Azura with genuine affection, often showering her with compliments and encouragement. Lyra's heart twisted in confusion as she watched the two, feeling an unsettling sense of being left out. One evening, Lyra returned home after a long day at work, her exhaustion weighing heavily on her. She found Keaton and Azura in the living room, surrounded by an array of craft supplies. The two were engrossed in a project, their laughter blending into a melody that filled the air. However, when Azura noticed Lyra entering, her smile faltered for just a moment, a flicker of something shadowy crossing her features before she resumed her cheerful facade. Lyra's heart sank. It was as if Azura were momentarily torn between two worlds, her loyalty split in ways Lyra couldn't understand. Later that night, as they prepared for bed, Lyra decided to broach the subject with Keaton. "Have you noticed how much Azura seems to focus on you lately?" she asked, her voice hesitant. Keaton shrugged, a smile spreading across his face. "I think she just loves spending time with us both. It's natural for her to want to bond with me," Lyra nodded, trying to suppress the unease bubbling within her. "Yeah, I get that, but it feels different. It's almost like she's obsessed with you." The lightness in Keaton's expression faded, replaced by a hint of concern. The following days saw Azura's fixation deepen, her behavior becoming increasingly peculiar. She would often interrupt Lyra when she was speaking to Keaton, her tone possessive. "Daddy, can we play outside?" she would say, her gaze locking onto Keaton, ignoring Lyra entirely. Lyra's heart would twist with a mixture of irritation and fear. She tried to remain patient, understanding that Azura was adjusting, but the way the girl looked at Keaton made Lyra feel like an intruder in her own home. One night, Lyra found herself unable to sleep, her thoughts racing. She lay in bed, the shadows cast by the moonlight playing tricks on her mind, and listened as Keaton read a bedtime story to Azura from the other room. The sound of their laughter echoed in the darkness, a reminder of the joy that had filled their home. Yet, instead of comfort, the laughter only amplified her unease. Why did Azura's laughter seem tinged with an eerie quality? The thought haunted Lyra as she tossed and turned, the walls of her home closing in around her. In the days that followed, Lyra tried to find moments to connect with Azura, but every time she reached out, the girl would slip away, gravitating towards Keaton as if he were a magnet. It was painful to witness, each interaction leaving Lyra feeling more isolated. During a family outing to the park, Lyra suggested they play a game of tag. Azura hesitated for a moment before turning her eyes toward Keaton, who eagerly joined in, running after Azura with an enthusiasm that made Lyra's heart ache. In a desperate attempt to regain her place in Azura's heart, Lyra devised a plan. She decided to create a special day just for the two of them, an opportunity to bond without Keaton's presence. Lyra planned a trip to a nearby amusement park, imagining the thrill of rides and cotton candy. She could picture Azura's laughter filling the air, the joy of their connection unfurling in bright colors. However, when Lyra revealed the plan, Azura's face fell, a mix of disappointment and something darker flickering across her features. On the day of their outing, Lyra's excitement soon turned into anxiety as Azura's mood soured. "I want Daddy to come," Azura insisted, her voice firm. Lyra felt the sting of rejection, but she pressed on, hoping to change Azura's mind. "It'll be so much fun. Just you and me, exploring the rides and eating ice cream," but Azura crossed her arms, her blue eyes narrowing with determination. The girl's resistance felt more like a challenge, leaving Lyra questioning whether she was losing her daughter to an unsettling obsession. Finally, on the day of the outing, Lyra relented and allowed Keaton to join them. However, Azura's demeanor shifted, her joy seeming to hinge solely on Keaton's presence. As they navigated the park, Lyra felt like a ghost, watching the two of them share inside jokes and laughter while she stood on the periphery. The day became a blur of motion and laughter, but Lyra felt invisible, a quiet observer in the happiness that seemed to flourish without her. After returning home, Lyra sank into the couch, feeling the weight of her heart in her throat. "Keaton, we need to talk," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He turned, concern etched across his face. "What's wrong?" Lyra took a deep breath, searching for the right words. "I feel like Azura is. I don't know how to explain it. She seems obsessed with you, and it's starting to affect our relationship." Keaton looked thoughtful, but Lyra could see the spark of disbelief in his eyes. "She's just a kid trying to adapt. It's normal," Lyra, he reassured her. But Lyra felt an unshakable certainty gnawing at her. As the days turned into weeks, she began to wonder what lay beneath Azura's seemingly innocent fixation on Keaton. With each passing moment, the atmosphere of their home thickened, a darkness settling in that seemed to cling to the walls like a ghost. Lyra knew she needed to confront not just Azura, but the growing unease that threatened to consume the fragile fabric of their family. Lyra felt an insistent urge to uncover the layers of Azura's mysterious past, believing that understanding the girl's history might help her make sense of the unsettling occurrences. She began her investigation by reaching out to the adoption agency, hoping to glean any information that had not been shared during their initial meetings. The agency staff were polite but cautious, emphasizing their commitment to confidentiality. Lyra's heart sank as they informed her that Azura's previous life was filled with significant trauma, details of which were intentionally withheld to protect her privacy. The shadows surrounding Azura's history seemed to grow darker, deepening Lyra's unease. Determined, Lyra spent hours poring over files and notes she had collected, hoping to piece together the puzzle of Azura's life before her arrival. Most of the documents contained vague references to a troubled family background, but nothing substantial. She stumbled upon a few photographs of Azura with a woman who appeared to be her biological mother. The woman had striking similarities to Azura, with dark hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to hold secrets of their own. Lyra felt a chill run down her spine as she studied the woman's expression, a mix of tenderness and despair that hinted at an untold story. One afternoon, while rummaging through the paperwork, Lyra found an old newspaper clipping that caught her attention. The headline read, "Local girl found abandoned, search for mother continues." The article detailed a harrowing story of a young girl, unnervingly similar to Azura, discovered wandering the streets alone, disoriented and frightened. Lyra's pulse quickened as she realized this girl was Azura, her past unfolding before her eyes like a horror story. There were mentions of a frantic search for the mother, but the story abruptly ended without resolution, leaving a chilling void that gnawed at Lyra's heart. Intrigued and alarmed, Lyra shared her findings with Keaton, her voice trembling as she recounted the tale. Keaton listened intently, concern etching his brow as Lyra detailed the shocking revelations. "Do you think she remembers?" he asked quietly, his voice low. Lyra shook her head, uncertainty flooding her mind. "I don't know, but I can't shake the feeling that something about her past is influencing her behavior now." Keaton agreed to help Lyra investigate further, a pact forming between them to unravel the darkness shrouding their daughter. As they dug deeper into Azura's past, Lyra and Keaton found themselves immersed in a world of neglect and heartache. They learned of foster homes, each more traumatic than the last, and the emotional scars that had undoubtedly shaped Azura. Each revelation felt like a weight added to their shoulders, a burden they couldn't seem to shake. They both felt a growing sense of urgency to protect Azura from whatever demons haunted her. Yet, with each new piece of information, the shadows of her past loomed larger, threatening to eclipse the light they had hoped to bring into her life. One day, while visiting a local library to search for more details, Lyra stumbled upon a woman who claimed to have known Azura's mother. The woman, her voice hushed, recounted tales of a woman consumed by her own darkness, prone to fits of rage and despair. She was troubled, a lost soul, the woman said, her eyes darting nervously around the room. People said she spoke to things that weren't there. Lyra felt the hairs on her neck stand on end. The chilling notion that Azura might have inherited her mother's fractured psyche began to creep into her thoughts, deepening the fissures in her heart. Returning home that evening, Lyra shared the woman's revelations with Keaton. What if there's something in Azura's blood? Something that makes her susceptible to whatever is happening, she wondered aloud, her voice shaking. Keaton frowned, visibly troubled by the implications. "We can't jump to conclusions. She's a child, Lyra. She needs our love and support." Lyra nodded, but the fear that coursed through her veins felt insurmountable. What if they were welcoming a darkness they couldn't comprehend? In the following days, Azura's behavior continued to grow more perplexing. She began to exhibit odd habits, often arranging her toys in specific patterns, whispering to them in a hushed voice that Lyra couldn't decipher. The girl would sit in front of her carefully arranged dolls for hours, her fingers moving as if she were conducting a silent orchestra. Lyra couldn't help but feel like she was witnessing something otherworldly, a ritual steeped in mystery and tinged with an unsettling energy that thrummed through the air. Keaton tried to reassure Lyra that this was normal childhood behavior, but deep down, Lyra felt the familiar sense of dread returning. One night, while lying in bed, Lyra overheard a conversation between Azura and Keaton. She had tiptoed past the slightly ajar door to check on them, the soft glow of a nightlight illuminating their faces. Azura was sitting on Keaton's lap, her voice a soft murmur. "Daddy, do you think she'll come back?" she asked, her expression earnest. Lyra's heart dropped at the question. Who was she? Azura's eyes sparkled with a mix of innocence and fear, a juxtaposition that made Lyra's stomach twist. Keaton's response was low and calm, but Lyra couldn't hear the words clearly, her mind racing with dark possibilities. The next morning, Lyra decided it was time to confront Azura directly, hoping to gently pry open the door to the girl's psyche. She chose a quiet moment while they were painting together, the sun streaming through the kitchen window. "Azura, sweetheart, is there something you want to tell me?" she asked softly, her heart pounding. The girl looked up from her painting, her eyes glinting with a mixture of mischief and something deeper, an unsettling spark that made Lyra's heart race. "No, Mommy." "I'm happy," Azura replied, her tone too cheerful, too perfect. Lyra felt a shiver crawl up her spine as she met her daughter's gaze, sensing the layers of meaning behind those innocent words. Determined to gain insight into Azura's fears, Lyra began exploring ways to connect with the girl's past. She thought about organizing a family therapy session, hoping that a professional could help guide them through the maze of emotions and trauma. But as she discussed the idea with Keaton, he expressed reservations. "Do you think that might just make things worse? Maybe we should give her time," he suggested, concern flickering in his eyes. Lyra felt a mixture of frustration and fear, desperate to bridge the gap that had formed between them. Despite their differing views, Lyra remained resolute. She couldn't ignore the growing sense of urgency that enveloped their home, the shadows creeping closer with each passing day. As they navigated the complexity of their situation, Lyra vowed to protect Azura at all costs, to delve deeper into the girl's mysterious past. It was clear that to understand Azura fully, they needed to confront the darkness lurking just beneath the surface, an abyss that threatened to swallow them whole. The stakes had never felt higher, and Lyra knew they had to uncover the truth before it was too late. As the unsettling atmosphere in their home continued to thicken, Lyra became increasingly convinced that Azura's fixation on Keaton was more than just a child's affection. It felt as though something dark and powerful was stirring within her, and Lyra was determined to uncover its source. She spent nights researching cases of children with traumatic pasts, desperate to find parallels that could explain Azura's peculiar behavior. Each article she read seemed to affirm her fears, highlighting the deep-rooted scars that could manifest as possessive tendencies, anxiety, and even more sinister urges. One fateful evening, while scrolling through a community forum dedicated to adoption and trauma, Lyra stumbled upon a post detailing a similar situation involving a child named Mia. The child had developed an intense fixation on her adoptive father, leading to increasingly bizarre and alarming behavior. Mia had come from a background of severe neglect, and her fixation had ultimately escalated into disturbing episodes that put the entire family at risk. Lyra's heart raced as she read about how Mia would speak to imaginary friends and exhibit knowledge of events she shouldn't have been able to understand. The hair on the back of Lyra's neck prickled at the realization that they were not alone in this nightmare. Determined to confront Azura, Lyra sought a moment when she could speak with her daughter alone. She waited until a quiet afternoon when Keaton was working late, and the house was enveloped in an uneasy stillness. As they sat on the floor surrounded by Azura's toys, Lyra felt a mix of tenderness and dread. "Azura, sweetheart, I want to talk to you about something important," she said, her voice steady despite the tempest swirling inside her. The little girl looked up at her with those intense blue eyes, a flicker of something darker dancing within them. "Are you scared of anything?" Sweetie, Lyra asked, her heart pounding in her chest. Azura's gaze shifted away, her fingers toying with the doll's hair as she contemplated the question. "No, Mommy." "I'm brave," she replied, her tone almost defiant. Lyra felt a chill run down her spine. "But sometimes, brave people get scared. It's okay to talk about it," she coaxed gently. Azura's expression hardened, and for a fleeting moment, Lyra caught a glimpse of the girl she had once believed was innocent. "I'm not scared of anything. Not anymore," Azura said, a strange finality in her voice. Lyra's heart raced as she pressed on, desperate to break through the wall Azura had built. "What about your old life? Is there something you want to tell me?" The room felt charged with an energy that made Lyra's skin crawl. Azura's gaze sharpened, and she leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Mommy, sometimes she talks to me." The woman in the pictures, Lyra felt her stomach drop. "What woman, honey?" she asked, fear gripping her heart. Azura's lips curled into a smile that sent shivers down Lyra's spine. "My mommy," she said, her voice soft yet chilling. The revelation sent shock waves through Lyra, and she struggled to maintain her composure. "What does she say?" Lyra pressed, her mind racing with the implications. She tells me secrets. She says I can be anything I want, that I don't have to listen to you." Azura's tone had shifted, the innocent childlike wonder replaced by something darker, more menacing. Lyra felt the air grow thick and heavy, the shadows in the room seeming to stretch and twist. "Azura, you need to listen to me," Lyra said firmly, attempting to keep her voice steady. "You're safe here. I love you, and I want to help you." But Azura only giggled, a sound that echoed unnaturally in the dim light. "She's coming back for me, Mommy. I don't need your help anymore." Lyra felt her heart pound wildly in her chest as the implications of Azura's words crashed over her like a tidal wave. There was a sense of inevitability in Azura's tone, an alarming certainty that sent fear coursing through Lyra's veins. As the girl continued to speak, Lyra felt as though she were losing her grip on reality, as if the very fabric of their lives was fraying at the edges. Desperate to find answers, Lyra confronted Keaton when he returned home. "We need to talk about Azura," she began, her voice shaking. She recounted the conversation, watching as Keaton's face shifted from concern to disbelief. "Lyra, she's a child with a traumatic past. It's not unusual for her to create stories about her mother," he argued, trying to reassure her. But Lyra could feel the weight of her fears growing heavier, as if they were being suffocated by the darkness that surrounded them. "What if it's more than that, Keaton? What if there's something inside her? Something dangerous?" Determined to uncover the truth, Lyra started researching the phenomenon of children displaying signs of inherited trauma. She discovered accounts of children exhibiting behaviors linked to their biological parents, sometimes taking on their fears, phobias, and even darker traits. The more she read, the more terrified she became. What if Azura was channeling the trauma and darkness of her mother? What if the whispers she heard were not just figments of her imagination, but a manifestation of something more sinister lurking in the shadows? That night, Lyra lay in bed wide awake, haunted by thoughts of Azura and the chilling connection to her mother. She felt the tension between her and Keaton grow as they lay in silence, the weight of unspoken fears hanging in the air. The shadows in the room seemed to pulse and shift, mocking her with their presence. Lyra closed her eyes, trying to block out the encroaching darkness, but sleep evaded her. Instead, she found herself lost in memories of Azura's laughter, now tinged with a sense of foreboding that clung to her heart. Days turned into a blur as Lyra became increasingly consumed by her quest for answers. She sought out specialists who dealt with trauma in children, hoping they could provide insight into Azura's behavior. Yet, each meeting left her feeling more isolated, the professionals offering assurances that did little to ease her fears. They advised patience and understanding, but Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that something was dangerously amiss. Each time she returned home, the shadows seemed to loom larger, their whispers growing more insistent. In a moment of desperation, Lyra decided to reach out to the woman she had met at the library, hoping she might shed light on the dark legacy of Azura's mother. The woman was hesitant to share more, her voice trembling with fear as she spoke. She had a reputation for losing herself, the woman explained. There were stories in the community. People said she could see things, talk to things that weren't there. Lyra felt her heart race. The pieces were beginning to fit together, revealing a chilling tapestry of the past that had remained hidden from view. With every revelation, Lyra felt the urgency intensify. The threat lurking within Azura was becoming harder to ignore, a sinister presence that seemed to shadow her every move. As Lyra and Keaton grappled with their fears, they realized they were no longer just parents, they were now unwilling participants in a harrowing struggle against the darkness that threatened to consume their family. Lyra could feel the walls closing in, the shadows whispering secrets that only Azura seemed to understand. It was clear that the threat was real, and if they didn't act quickly, it might just tear their family apart. The days following Lyra's revelations felt like a slow descent into a nightmare, the shadows growing longer and darker within their home. Lyra and Keaton tried to maintain a facade of normalcy, but every passing moment felt charged with tension, a constant reminder of the sinister undercurrents lurking just beneath the surface. Azura's behavior shifted from simply unsettling to downright disturbing, her interactions with Keaton taking on a new intensity that made Lyra's skin crawl. The little girl's laughter echoed in the hallways, but it was laced with a haunting quality that made Lyra's heart race. One evening, Lyra was cleaning up after dinner when she noticed Azura standing at the foot of the stairs, staring into the darkness that enveloped the hallway. "What are you doing?" Sweetie, Lyra asked, her voice soft yet tinged with concern. Azura didn't respond immediately. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, as if listening intently to something only she could hear. "She's waiting for me," Azura finally replied, her voice barely above a whisper. The chilling tone sent shivers down Lyra's spine, and she felt a wave of nausea wash over her. "Who's waiting for you, Azura?" she pressed, her heart pounding in her chest. "Mommy," Azura said simply, a smile spreading across her face that felt unsettlingly predatory. Lyra's breath caught in her throat as the implications of the words hung heavy in the air. The little girl's innocent appearance belied the darkness that was clearly at play, and Lyra's instincts screamed at her to protect her daughter from whatever force was weaving its way into their lives. "Azura, you know that your mother isn't here. We are your family now," Lyra said, her voice shaking as she desperately tried to anchor her daughter to reality. But Azura's demeanor shifted in an instant, her expression darkening as if she were suddenly aware of a presence that Lyra could not perceive. "You don't understand, Mommy. She's always here. She watches me," Azura replied, her tone ominous, her eyes glazing over with an unsettling clarity that made Lyra's heart race. "What does she want?" Lyra asked, her voice barely a whisper. "She wants me to be strong," the girl said, the innocent facade slipping away as the darkness crept in closer. Over the following days, Lyra noticed a growing intensity in Azura's fixation on Keaton, an all-consuming obsession that seemed to morph into something almost grotesque. The little girl began mirroring Keaton's actions, adopting his mannerisms and even using phrases he often said. It was as if Azura were trying to become a reflection of him, blurring the lines between child and adult, innocent and sinister. Lyra felt a cold dread grip her heart as she watched the transformation unfold, the vibrant child she once knew fading into a shadow of her former self. One afternoon, Lyra walked into the living room to find Azura standing eerily still in front of Keaton, who was absorbed in his work. "What are you doing?" Lyra asked, her voice trembling as the girl's blank stare remained fixed on Keaton. "I'm watching," Azura replied in a sing-song voice that sent chills down Lyra's spine. "Watching for what?" Lyra inquired, her heart pounding in her chest. "For her," Azura said, a wide smile spreading across her face, revealing an unsettling innocence that felt profoundly wrong. As the nights wore on, Lyra began to have vivid nightmares, each one more terrifying than the last. In her dreams, Azura would appear, her face twisted in a grotesque smile as she beckoned Lyra into the darkness. Lyra would try to scream, but no sound would come out, and she felt paralyzed, helpless to escape the impending doom. Each morning she would wake in a cold sweat, the echoes of her dreams lingering like a haunting melody that refused to fade. The sense of dread became a suffocating blanket, wrapping itself around her as she faced the reality of their situation. One night, after yet another sleepless evening, Lyra decided to confront the darkness that had seeped into their lives. She entered Azura's room, her heart racing, determined to reassure her daughter. But as she stepped inside, she was met with a chilling sight. Azura sat in the center of her room, surrounded by an array of toys arranged in a perfect circle. The girl's gaze was distant, her face illuminated by the faint glow of the moonlight filtering through the window. "What are you doing?" Azura Lyra asked, her voice shaking as she stepped closer. "I'm playing with my friends," Azura replied, her voice eerily calm. Lyra's stomach twisted as she scanned the room, realizing that the toys weren't just scattered, they were positioned in a way that felt intentional, almost ritualistic. "Azura, it's time for bed," Lyra urged, trying to maintain her composure. But Azura's expression changed suddenly, her eyes narrowing as a flicker of defiance sparked within them. "No, Mommy, they don't want to go to bed. They want to play." The air in the room thickened, and Lyra felt a wave of dread wash over her. "Azura, stop it. This isn't funny," she said, her voice rising as she moved to collect the toys. But Azura stood up, blocking her path with a fierceness that caught Lyra off guard. "You don't understand. They need me," she screamed, her small voice reverberating off the walls. Lyra's heart raced as the desperation in her daughter's tone cut through her, and she realized they were no longer just dealing with childhood games, they were teetering on the brink of something much darker. In the following days, Lyra felt a tightening grip around her heart, a sense of impending doom that seemed to settle in the very foundation of their home. Azura's behavior escalated, each day bringing a new level of chaos as the little girl's connection to whatever force was guiding her grew more profound. Lyra could sense the malevolence lurking just beneath the surface, and her instincts screamed for her to act before it was too late. Desperate for answers, Lyra returned to the adoption agency, seeking anything that could explain the sudden changes in Azura. The staff were sympathetic, yet they reiterated the importance of confidentiality. But Lyra pressed them, her fear spilling over into frustration. "You have to tell me what you know. There's something wrong with my daughter," she pleaded. Finally, an employee relented, her expression grave. There were rumors about her mother's history. People said she had unusual gifts, she whispered, the words feeling like ice in Lyra's veins. "Gifts," Lyra repeated, incredulous. "What do you mean?" The woman hesitated, glancing around as if the very walls could listen. "Some believed she could communicate with spirits, that she had a connection to the other side," she confessed. Lyra felt a chill grip her heart, the implications sending her spiraling into a state of fear. The idea that Azura might be channeling something from her mother's past felt too monstrous to comprehend, yet every bizarre occurrence they had experienced seemed to point to this disturbing reality. When Lyra returned home, she found Keaton in the living room, looking pale and drawn. "What's wrong?" Lyra asked, her heart racing as she sensed something was off. "I don't know how to explain this, but I saw something in the hallway," he admitted, his voice shaking. "What do you mean?" Lyra pressed, fear coursing through her. "I thought I saw Azura standing there, but she wasn't moving. It was like she was, waiting for something." Lyra felt the blood drain from her face as the chilling notion settled in whatever was unfolding within their home was far from over. As night fell, Lyra and Keaton huddled together on the couch, the oppressive silence broken only by the occasional creaks of the old house. They kept the lights dim, the atmosphere thick with tension. It felt as if the very walls were closing in around them, suffocating any semblance of safety. Each flicker of shadow sent chills coursing through Lyra's spine, and she could feel the weight of their fears pressing down on her. She knew they had to confront the truth lurking in the depths of Azura's mind before it spiraled out of control. As they braced for the confrontation ahead, Lyra sensed a dark energy gathering, an unsettling presence that seemed to watch them from the corners of the room. The whispers she had once dismissed were now impossible to ignore, echoing in her mind like an ominous warning. The descent into horror had begun, and Lyra felt powerless to stop it. knowing that their family was now entwined in a nightmarish dance with a darkness that threatened to consume them all. As the darkness deepened around them, Lyra and Keaton could feel the oppressive weight of their situation pressing down on their hearts. Every creak of the house echoed like a warning bell, urging them to confront the nightmare they had unwittingly unleashed. Lyra could sense that time was running out. They needed to act, and they needed to do it quickly. The whispers in the shadows had grown louder, and Azura's fixation on Keaton had morphed into an all-consuming obsession that threatened to tear their family apart. Determined to confront the source of the darkness, Lyra decided to dig deeper into Azura's past, desperate for any clue that could help them understand what was happening. She unearthed an old box in the attic filled with photographs, letters, and scraps of newspaper clippings. As she rifled through the contents, her heart sank at the realization that the woman in the photos was not just Azura's mother, she was a figure steeped in tragedy and darkness. The articles detailed mysterious disappearances connected to her, whispers of a cult that had once thrived in their town, seeking to harness the power of the supernatural. With each piece of evidence, Lyra felt the dread seep deeper into her bones. She learned that Azura's mother had been a part of something sinister, a group that believed in channeling spirits and harnessing their energy for malevolent purposes. As Lyra pieced together the chilling history, she couldn't shake the feeling that Azura was somehow the vessel for her mother's unfinished business. The realization sent shivers down her spine. They had not just adopted a child, they had invited something dark into their lives. That night, Lyra and Keaton prepared for what they knew would be a harrowing confrontation. They set up candles around the living room, a makeshift circle meant to offer protection against whatever malevolent force was guiding Azura. Lyra's heart raced as she recalled the stories she had read, children who had been lost to the darkness, their innocence consumed by the very powers they had unwittingly tapped into. "We need to keep Azura here with us," Lyra said, her voice trembling as she looked into Keaton's eyes. "We can't let her get away. We have to fight for her." As the clock struck midnight, the air in the house shifted, thickening with a palpable tension. Lyra and Keaton could feel it. The shadows seemed to pulse and writhe as if alive. The silence was deafening, and it felt as if the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for the impending confrontation. Suddenly, Azura appeared in the doorway, her expression serene yet unnaturally calm, as if she were being guided by an unseen force. "Mommy, Daddy," she called softly, her voice echoing in the stillness. "I've come to play." "Azura, sweetheart, you need to come back to us," Lyra urged, her heart aching at the sight of her daughter. "We love you and we want to help you," but Azura only smiled, a chilling grin that felt entirely alien. "You don't understand, Mommy. I'm stronger now," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "She says I can be whoever I want, that I don't need you anymore." The chilling words hung in the air, a palpable threat that sent shivers down Lyra's spine. In that moment, Lyra felt a surge of determination rise within her. "No, you are our daughter. You belong with us," she cried, her voice firm and unyielding. "Whatever is happening, we can fight it together." Azura's expression shifted, confusion flickering in her eyes as if the battle between light and dark raged within her. "Mommy," she said, her voice wavering. But before Lyra could reach out, the atmosphere around them changed, dark tendrils of shadow creeping from the corners of the room, wrapping around Azura like a shroud. Keaton stepped forward, his heart racing. "You have to fight it, Azura. We're here for you," he shouted, his voice echoing through the darkness. But the shadows surged forward, wrapping around Azura, pulling her deeper into their malevolent embrace. Lyra could see the struggle in her daughter's eyes, a glimmer of the girl she once knew fighting against the encroaching darkness. "Help me, Mommy. I don't want this," Azura screamed, her voice echoing in despair. In that moment, Lyra felt the weight of their family's history pressing down on her. She recalled the stories of mothers fighting for their children, the sacrifices made to protect those they loved. "We love you, Azura. You're not alone," Lyra cried, her voice breaking with emotion. With every ounce of strength she possessed, she reached out toward her daughter, willing her to break free from the darkness that sought to claim her. "You are stronger than this. You can fight it." Suddenly, a blinding light erupted from the candles, illuminating the room and pushing back against the shadows. Lyra felt the warmth enveloping her, a protective barrier against the encroaching darkness. Azura's eyes widened in shock as the light surged around her, illuminating the fear and determination etched on her face. The shadows recoiled, twisting and writhing as if in pain, their hold on Azura weakening with every pulse of light. "I'm here, sweetheart. You can do this," Lyra urged, her heart racing as she fought to keep the light burning bright. In that moment of desperation, Azura's internal struggle reached a breaking point. With a cry that pierced the suffocating darkness, she tore free from the shadows, the malevolent force recoiling as if struck. "Mommy," Azura screamed, launching herself into Lyra's arms. Lyra held her daughter tightly, the warmth of Azura's body grounding her in the chaos. But even as they embraced, the darkness swirled menacingly around them, refusing to be banished so easily. Keaton stepped forward, standing beside Lyra and Azura, his expression resolute. "We won't let you take her," he shouted at the darkness, his voice fierce and unwavering. The shadows seemed to pulse in response, coiling and twisting with a life of their own, but Lyra could feel the power of their love pushing back against the malevolence. Together they formed a barrier, an unbreakable bond that radiated with strength and defiance. But the shadows fought back, swirling in a frenzied dance, trying to reclaim what they believed was theirs. Lyra felt the air grow thick and heavy, the whispers in her mind growing louder as the darkness sought to penetrate their defenses. "Stay strong," she urged Azura, who clung to her tightly, her small body trembling with fear. Lyra focused on the love they shared, the bond that tied them together, drawing strength from every moment they had spent as a family. As the battle raged on, Lyra felt a sudden surge of power, an energy igniting within her as if their love had become a tangible force. "You have no power here," she cried, her voice rising above the din of the shadows. "You are not welcome." "Azura is ours." With those words, the light blazed brighter, illuminating the room with an intensity that drove the shadows back, forcing them to writhe and recoil in pain. In that moment of clarity, Lyra saw the darkness for what it was, a manifestation of fear and pain, a reflection of the trauma that had haunted Azura and her mother. "You cannot have her. We will fight for her," Lyra shouted, her voice ringing with conviction. And as she stood there, surrounded by the light of their love, she felt the darkness shatter, splintering into 1,000 fragments as the energy surged around them. With a final, piercing scream, the shadows dissipated, vanishing into the corners of the room as if they had never existed. Lyra held Azura tightly, tears streaming down her cheeks as she felt the warmth of her daughter's body against her. The oppressive weight that had filled their home lifted, replaced by a sense of peace that enveloped them like a warm embrace. Keaton stepped forward, wrapping his arms around both Lyra and Azura, their family finally whole again. But as they stood together, Lyra could still sense the lingering darkness, a shadow that would forever be a part of their story. They had fought for Azura and had won, but the scars of the past would take time to heal. The battle may have been won, but the war against the shadows would continue, a reminder of the darkness that lurked just beyond the light. As dawn broke, painting the sky with hues of gold and pink, Lyra looked into Azura's eyes, her heart swelling with love. "We're safe now, sweetheart," she whispered, brushing a stray hair from Azura's face. We'll always be together, Azura nodded, her expression softened by the warmth of the morning light. I love you, Mommy, she said, her voice filled with sincerity. Lyra felt a sense of hope blossom within her, a glimmer of light that promised brighter days ahead. Together they stepped into the new day, the remnants of their nightmare fading like the shadows of the night. They were a family bound by love, and no darkness could ever take that away from them. As they faced the future together, Lyra knew that they would rise stronger, united against whatever challenges lay ahead, ready to embrace the light. The man in the attic. I remember this vaguely, like a dream half remembered upon waking, the edges blurred and frayed. At just 9 years old, I found myself living in a sprawling Victorian relic, its once proud facade now dulled by years of neglect. The paint was chipped and faded, revealing layers of color beneath, while the tall windows seemed to stare blankly out at the world as if keeping secrets of their own. The creaky floorboards whispered stories of the past, and the air was thick with the musty scent of old wood, each corner of the house shrouded in shadows and forgotten memories. Our yard was overgrown, wildflowers and weeds intertwining in a chaotic dance, and the old oak tree in the backyard stood like a sentinel, its gnarled branches stretching out as if to embrace the sky. On either side of our home, the neighbors painted contrasting pictures of life in the neighborhood. To the left, the Johnsons maintained a meticulously trimmed lawn, their cheerful garden bursting with marigolds and petunias. Mrs. Johnson, always waving from her porch, seemed the picture of suburban warmth. On the right lived Mrs. Henderson, an elderly woman whose house appeared to sag under the weight of years. Her garden was a wild tangle of overgrown bushes, but it was her collection of garden gnomes that truly stood out. Each gnome, with its chipped paint and mismatched hats, was arranged in bizarre scenes throughout her yard, giving it an unsettling yet whimsical quality. Mrs. Henderson often stood by her gate, eyes narrowed as she observed the world around her, her sharp demeanor tempered by an undercurrent of kindness. Despite her prickly exterior, I sensed she harbored her own suspicions about the comings and goings in the neighborhood, particularly when it came to the unusual occurrences that seemed to unfold in our home. The house had captivated my parents when we first moved in. They sought a fresh start after my father, a once ambitious marketing executive, lost his job due to company downsizing. The financial strain weighed heavily on them, so they hoped the lower cost of living in this old Victorian would ease their burden. My mother, a school teacher in her late 30s with a penchant for optimism, envisioned us creating happy memories within its walls, determined to fill the house with warmth despite its eerie ambiance. Her laughter often echoed through the rooms, a beacon of hope against the encroaching shadows. Meanwhile, my father, a practical man in his early 40s, buried himself in job applications and home repairs, trying to reclaim some semblance of stability for our family. My siblings and I embraced the adventure of moving into the unfamiliar house. Chloe, the oldest at 11, was fiercely protective and took on the role of our unofficial leader, always organizing our games and explorations. At 9, I was caught somewhere between childhood and adolescence, filled with curiosity yet shadowed by growing unease. Lily, the youngest at just 5, brought innocence and wonder, her wide eyes constantly searching for magic in the mundane. She often spent hours weaving flowers into crowns or pretending to be a princess in our sprawling backyard, filled with wildflowers and old trees that begged for climbing. Our family dynamics were close-knit, bonded by laughter and shared experiences, but as we settled into our new home, I could sense an undercurrent of tension growing, a silent struggle against the weight of our new reality. At first, everything seemed normal, almost idyllic. We spent weekends painting the walls and arranging furniture, laughing as we made the house our own. But soon, small things began to shift. At first, it was merely the feeling of being watched. I'd catch glimpses of movement in my peripheral vision, nothing substantial, just a flicker of motion, like a shadow darting away when I turned to look. I shrugged it off, attributing it to my overactive imagination. But then, the subtle disturbances escalated. Food began to go missing from the pantry, items vanishing without explanation. One morning, my mother noticed that the loaf of bread had disappeared, leaving only the empty bag behind. It must have been Chloe, she said, shaking her head with a smile. But I knew my older sister wasn't the culprit. She was too busy with her school projects to care about a loaf of bread. A week later, my father's favorite snack, a box of chocolate-covered pretzels, vanished as well. My parents exchanged concerned glances, but they brushed it off as forgetfulness. It was the kind of thing families laughed about, a shared quirk of life. But I felt the dread creeping in, like a shadow that wouldn't let go. As time went on, things continued to shift. My toys began to be found in odd places, strewn across the living room when I was certain I had left them in my room. One afternoon, I discovered my action figures arranged in a bizarre tableau on the kitchen counter, as if they were reenacting some unseen drama. My heart raced, but I hesitated to mention it. I was afraid my parents would dismiss my fears as childish fantasies. My sister Lily, however, seemed to sense my anxiety. "Are you okay?" she'd whisper late at night, her eyes wide with concern. I would nod, though I could feel the weight of my secrets pressing down on me. The neighbors began to notice strange happenings too. Mrs. Henderson, the elderly woman with a penchant for gossip, knocked on our door one sunny afternoon, her brow furrowed. "I heard some strange noises coming from your house last night," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Sounded like ... Well, something breaking." My mother dismissed her concerns with a nervous laugh. "Oh, we're just settling in. You know how things can be in an old house." Mrs. Henderson nodded, but I could see the doubt etched on her face. I felt an urge to tell her the truth, to confess that we weren't imagining the disturbances, but I stayed silent. As the weeks wore on, the strange happenings escalated. One night I overheard my parents arguing in hushed tones about the noises. My father, a practical man, insisted it was just the house settling, while my mother's voice trembled with worry. But what if it's something more? What if it's affecting the girls? I lay in bed, heart racing, listening to their whispers, and I felt a chill creeping up my spine. Things came to a head one evening when the police were called to our neighborhood. Mrs. Henderson's garden gnomes had gone missing, and in their place were our old toys, arranged in grotesque scenes on her lawn. My parents were horrified. "We didn't do that," my father exclaimed, but the neighbors were already whispering about us, convinced we were up to no good. "You must have heard something strange at night," one neighbor said, glancing sideways at us, suspicion clouding her features. My mother shook her head, her face pale. "We're just a family trying to start over." But the damage was done. The rumors had begun, and the isolation we felt grew heavier. As the weeks turned into months, the strange incidents escalated. My dreams turned into nightmares filled with dark figures lurking in the corners of my mind, and I'd wake up gasping, drenched in sweat. I often found myself drawn to the closet, standing in front of the heavy door, feeling an inexplicable pull to open it. But I couldn't muster the courage. It felt like a portal to something sinister. The air around the closet grew thick with tension, and I began to avoid it altogether, hoping that ignorance would keep the darkness at bay. The moment that foreshadowed the man's reveal came unexpectedly, shrouded in the mundane chaos of family life. One evening, after a particularly unsettling day at school filled with whispers of fear and shadows lurking in the hallways, I returned home to a familiar scene. Chloe and Lily were bickering over a toy that had mysteriously reappeared in the living room. its presence sparking a familiar sibling squabble. "It's mine," Lily insisted, her small fists clenched in frustration, while Chloe retorted, "You lost it." The argument escalated, their voices rising with tension that seemed to hang in the air like a storm cloud ready to burst. I watched them, my heart racing, feeling a strange sense of detachment as their dispute unfolded. The familiar sounds of our home, laughter, playful banter, even the occasional argument suddenly felt foreign, tinged with an unsettling atmosphere. It was as if a dark shadow lurked just beyond the edges of our normalcy, waiting for the right moment to intrude. As their bickering filled the room, I felt an eerie calm wash over me, a heavy weight pressing down on my chest. It was a feeling I couldn't shake, a sense that something was wrong, that we were not alone. It was in that moment, amidst the chaos of sibling rivalry, that the unsettling notion crept in the man was watching us. I glanced around the room, searching the corners for any sign of movement, but all I found were the familiar shadows cast by the setting sun, stretching and yawning across the walls. Suddenly the air grew thick with anticipation, as if the house itself was holding its breath. I felt a chill race down my spine, a primal instinct urging me to be silent, to alert my sisters to the danger lurking just outside our perception. It was a feeling that had been gnawing at me for weeks, but now it crystallized into a terrifying reality. The man, whoever he was, had been waiting, watching us from the darkness, poised to strike when we were most vulnerable. I could sense it, the shift in the atmosphere, a prelude to something unimaginable. Then, without warning, the lights flickered and went out, plunging us into an oppressive darkness that swallowed the room whole. A collective gasp escaped my sister's lips, and I felt the air grow thick with dread. The familiar bickering fell silent, replaced by an uneasy stillness that set my heart racing. In that moment, I felt the world shrink around us, the walls of our home closing in as shadows danced ominously in the corners. I strained to listen, hoping to catch any sound that might reassure me. But the silence was deafening, broken only by the faint creaking of the house settling, a sound I had always found comforting, now twisted into something foreboding. My instincts screamed at me to act, to protect my sisters from whatever lurked in the dark. I leaned closer, whispering urgently to them, "Stay quiet, we need to listen." But before I could finish my thought, a familiar sound pierced the silence, the slow, deliberate creak of the closet door opening. My breath caught in my throat, and my heart raced as fear tightened its grip. The sound was unmistakable, a haunting echo of all the nights I had dreaded the closet's ominous presence. I could feel a cold sweat forming on my brow, each drop heavy with the realization that the moment I had feared was finally here. Suddenly a figure emerged in the doorway, its outline grotesque and distorted by the darkness that cloaked it. I stood frozen, my mind reeling as I tried to process what I was seeing. It was as if the darkness had materialized into a form, a living embodiment of every nightmare that had haunted my childhood. I couldn't breathe as I took in its unsettling features, sunken eyes that glinted like shards of glass, a mouth twisted into a silent scream. My body was paralyzed by terror, and all I could do was stare as the figure loomed closer, a harbinger of dread that shattered the fragile barrier between our innocence and the horrors that lay beyond. In that instant, I knew the nightmare was no longer a mere figment of my imagination. It had come to claim us. It lunged forward, and in a heartbeat, my father charged into the room, instinctively rushing to protect us. "Get away from them," he yelled, his voice a mixture of fear and fury. The man darted past my father, disappearing into the hallway. My heart raced as I watched my father pursue him, the sound of his heavy footsteps echoing against the wooden floor. "Call the police," he shouted back to my mother, urgency in his tone. Lily was crying, her small hands clutching my arm tightly. "What's happening?" she whimpered, looking up at me with wide, frightened eyes. I tried to comfort her, but my mind was racing. I could hear my father's footsteps pounding against the floor as he barreled down the stairs, shouting for the man to stop. Chloe and I exchanged terrified glances, both of us knowing there was no stopping what had begun. In the chaos, my mother hurried to dial 911, her hands trembling. "Please hurry. Someone's in our house," she cried into the phone, her voice breaking. I felt paralyzed, stuck in a moment where the lines between reality and nightmare blurred. Then, just as quickly as it began, the sounds of my father's pursuit faded, replaced by a haunting silence. The weight of dread settled around us like a fog. When the police arrived, they swept through the house, their flashlights illuminating empty spaces where nightmares had taken form. But the man had vanished, leaving nothing but an unsettling absence. "Are you sure he was here?" one officer asked, his brow furrowed in confusion. My father, still shaken, could only nod, his breath coming in short gasps. In the aftermath, whispers spread through our small town, tales of the house's sinister history unfurling like smoke. The previous owners had faced their own tragedies. A little girl had gone missing, and though her fate remained a mystery, the weight of her absence lingered like a specter. The police conducted a thorough search of the house, looking for any clues that could explain the man's presence and the unsettling events surrounding us. In the attic, they discovered a hidden compartment behind a loose panel in the wall. Inside, they found an assortment of items, toys that had belonged to both me and my sisters, along with pieces of clothing that looked eerily familiar. My heart raced as I recognized the small pink dress that belonged to the missing girl from years ago. The officers exchanged grim looks, realizing they had stumbled onto something far more sinister than they had anticipated. Among the belongings were also photographs of children, their faces blurred but unmistakably filled with fear. It became clear that the man had been lurking in the silhouettes of our lives, taking what he wanted, leaving only the remnants of his twisted existence behind. The police concluded that he must have used hidden pathways in the house to evade detection, slipping between rooms and walls, a ghost haunting the very space we called home. They found small, concealed passageways, remnants of old construction techniques that allowed him to move undetected. The days that followed were suffused with tension, my family still reeling from the events. We were moved to safety by a protective community that had come together to ensure we were shielded from further harm. Though we tried to return to normal, the horrors of that night haunted us, each creak of the floorboards echoing the terror we had endured. Years passed, and I tried to forget. I grew up, moved away, and filled my life with logic and reason, pushing aside the nightmares that had once plagued me. I believed that by embracing adulthood and its responsibilities, I could distance myself from the past. The house still stood, a guardian of its secrets, whispering to anyone brave enough to listen, but I had chosen to silence those whispers. But then, one fateful night, I stumbled upon a dusty box in the attic of my new home while searching for old board games to entertain my own children. It was an unassuming cardboard box, covered in a layer of grime, tucked away in a forgotten corner. Curiosity piqued. I dragged it into the light and opened it, revealing a collection of yellowed newspapers, faded clippings, and old photographs. My heart raced as I began to sift through the brittle pages, recognizing the names of people I'd long since forgotten, neighbors, classmates, and families who had been part of my childhood. As I flipped through the articles, my breath caught in my throat. One headline screamed in bold letters, "Missing child in nearby town." The article detailed the disappearance of a young boy who had vanished without a trace while playing in a park, his last known location just a short drive from our old house. My pulse quickened as I continued reading. The description of the boy was eerily familiar. and the details about his disappearance mirrored the events that had unfolded in our lives. A shadowy figure was reported lingering near the park at Red, a figure reminiscent of a phantom seen in the homes of other children. As I delved deeper, the articles painted a chilling picture. Each report described a pattern: children had gone missing under similar circumstances, and the unsettling presence of a man described as tall and gaunt, with wild eyes, had been noted by witnesses in various neighborhoods. Each description sent shivers down my spine, as they echoed the terror I had experienced as a child. The police suspected that this man was responsible for the disappearances, yet no one had ever caught him. He had slipped through the cracks of the community, a ghost that haunted our childhoods. I realized with dawning horror that all these stories of missing children began to surface shortly after our terrifying experience in that house. It struck me like a cold wave while we had been grappling with our own nightmare. A pattern of disappearances had unfolded in the community, each account echoing the fear that had consumed us. The chilling reports felt like pieces of a dark puzzle, revealing that the man who had haunted our childhood was not just a specter of our imagination, but part of a more sinister reality that emerged in the aftermath of our escape. The connection sent a shiver down my spine, as if the darkness we had fled were not as distant as I had hoped. As I thought back to those fearful nights, the hushed conversations between my parents made more sense. They had whispered anxiously about keeping us safe, about the dangers lurking in the shadows. The secrets they had shielded us from were far more sinister than I had ever imagined. Now, as I pieced together the horrifying puzzle, it became clear that the man who had tormented our family was part of a much larger nightmare. The deeper I dug into the box, the more I found photographs of missing children, their smiling faces frozen in time, juxtaposed against the stories of their vanishing. I felt a profound sadness wash over me as I looked at their innocent expressions. One photo caught my eye: a little girl in a pink dress, her smile bright and hopeful. It was as if the silhouettes of my childhood were rising up to meet me, the echoes of those lost children whispering through the dust, begging for recognition and remembrance. As I closed the box, a heavy weight settled in my chest. The fear that once gripped my childhood had been rooted in a deeper, darker reality. Now, with this knowledge, a cold dread settled over me, a sense of helplessness in the face of a darkness that refused to be forgotten. As I stared out my window into the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still out there, lurking in the night, waiting for his next opportunity to strike. As we reach the end of tonight's stories on Hauntales, it's time to let your mind drift away. Listen to the sound of the rain gently falling in the background. Let each drop calm your thoughts and ease you into a peaceful sleep. There's nothing to fear now, just the soothing rhythm of the rain. Focus on your breathing, let your body relax, and allow yourself to drift deeper into rest. Sleep peacefully, and we'll meet again tomorrow night for another story. Good night.